the air thick with the scent of paper, coffee, and tension. The speaker sits high at the center, black robes, powdered wig, gavel ready. On television, the effect is dignified. In person, it feels more like a stage. The session begins with ritual. Members rise, call out, "Mr. Speaker," as if invoking an incantation, and take turns performing outrage or defense. Each line lands to practiced applause or jeers from their own benches. The script never changes: accusation, denial, counteraccusation, procedural delay. When one member stumbles over figures in a budget report, hundreds of millions spent, millions missing, the speaker chuckles. Laughter ripples through the room. From the gallery, a few visitors shift uncomfortably. They've come from small towns or suburban ridings, expecting gravity. Instead they find levity. Somewhere outside these walls, that unaccounted spending might mean a delayed hospital wing, a cancelled housing program, a cut scholarship. Here, it's a punchline. The visitor's reaction, shock, maybe sadness, is the beginning of this book. It's the moment when the democratic stage reveals itself for what it has partly become, a theater of power whose actors mistake applause for accountability. The ritual and the mask. The design of Westminster-style politics is theatrical by intent. Its founders understood performance, order through ritual, hierarchy through costume. The mace, the wigs, the titles, right honorable, order, were meant to civilize conflict. In the 17th century, that formality separated debate from duel. But over centuries, the ritual hardened. The mask became the face. Political scientists describe the chamber as a competitive performance arena. Behavior inside it follows rules of dramaturgy, a script, the agenda, an audience, the media, and characters defined by opposition. The incentive is not cooperation but spectacle. Success is measured in headlines, not harmony. That's why laughter, jeers, and applause aren't slips, they're signals. They tell party members where the tribe stands. They tell cameras when to cut. The speaker's humor is part of the choreography, the safety valve that keeps a day's worth of hostility from exploding. Within the chamber, it reads as control, outside it as cruelty. Empathy lost in translation. To citizens, the laughter sounds heartless. To politicians, it sounds routine. This is the gap that defines modern politics, the difference between what behavior means inside and how it looks outside. Psychologists call this situational drift. Within closed systems, norms evolve until abnormality feels ordinary. A surgeon cracks jokes during a tense operation. A firefighter eats lunch beside the ashes of a home. It's not callousness but conditioning. Yet in politics, that same detachment erodes trust because the victims of failure are still alive to watch the show. The people in that chamber are not monsters, they are professionals caught in a loop of incentives that punish sincerity. Show anger too early and you look weak. Show compassion too late and you look manipulative. The safest posture is ironic distance, so they laugh. From deliberation to performance. Political historian Bernard Crick once wrote that democracy is government by discussion. But in many parliaments, discussion has been replaced by display. MPs now speak less to persuade colleagues than to generate viral clips. Soundbites replace substance because attention, not argument, has become the scarce resource. The speaker's chair, elevated like a conductor's podium, was designed to moderate. But modern technology reassigns the audience. Every phone in the chamber is a camera, every line a potential meme. Governance becomes content. Sociologist Irving Goffman, who studied human interaction as performance, might have recognized Question Period as a masterclass in front-stage behavior, the polished, public persona that conceals backstage doubt. The laughter, the jeers, the winks, they are all cues in a centuries-old play whose audience no longer claps for the same reasons. Why citizens feel betrayed. When ordinary people watch and feel revulsion, they're not overreacting, they're witnessing the erosion of ethical empathy. Governance should mirror the governed, instead, it reflects its own reflection. Citizens crave authenticity, but the structure rewards artifice. Over time, that dissonance breeds cynicism, and cynicism is the slow rot of democracy. A recent OECD survey found that in many advanced democracies, fewer than half of citizens trust their legislatures to act in the public interest. In Canada, trust hovers around 45%. Each scandal, each televised smirk widens that fissure. When trust collapses, participation follows. When participation falls, accountability dissolves. The tragedy is cyclical. Detachment breeds apathy, which breeds further detachment. What the laughter reveals. The laughter that echoes through those walls is not always joy. Sometimes it's nervousness, sometimes fatigue. But symbolically, it's the sound of distance, between intention and impact, between the public and its representatives. It tells us that empathy has been outsourced, and the maintenance of power has replaced the meaning of service. The purpose of this book is not to condemn individuals, but to examine the systemic theater that shapes their behavior. The problem isn't that people in power are uniquely unethical, it's that the architecture of power dulls their ethical senses. When institutions demand performance, performers rise. When they reward reflection, statesmen appear. The curtain call. As the session ends, the speaker rises, offers a final procedural joke, and the bench is empty. Outside, the air smells of rain and exhaust. A few tourists snap photos. Somewhere beyond Parliament Hill, a nurse finishes a night shift, a teacher grades papers, a mechanic closes the garage. They've all earned their pay quietly, without applause. Inside, the cameras fade to black. Tomorrow, the play begins again. Closing reflection. Democracy survives not on the rituals of its chambers, but on the conscience of its citizens. The laughter in the House is a mirror. It shows us what happens when institutions forget who's listening. To clean that mirror, we must first dare to look into it, not to scorn but to see. End of Chapter 1. Laughter in the House. Part 1. The Theater of Power. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Ritual. How Tradition Becomes Distraction. 1. The Weight of Ceremony. The session always begins the same way. A clerk in black robes carries the ceremonial mace into the chamber. Members rise, the speaker bows, the anthem plays. The moment lasts less than a minute, yet it anchors every debate that follows. The ritual is centuries old, borrowed from the British Parliament, which in turn borrowed from royal courts. Its purpose was once practical, to impose order in a room full of rivals, to remind all present that the law, not the monarch, held ultimate authority. But like many relics of power, the symbol has outlived its context. Today, the ceremony functions less as a reminder of law and more as a reminder of hierarchy. The ritual calms participants while quietly instructing citizens, this is not your space. 2. The origins of the mask. When Britain's first parliaments formed in the 13th century, debate often ended in bloodshed. Members shouted, fought, sometimes drew swords. To prevent chaos, the speaker's chair was created, literally raised above the floor, to symbolize neutrality and order. Robes and wigs followed, borrowed from the judiciary to lend gravitas. These inventions worked. The pageantry converted conflict into procedure. But over centuries, form hardened into fetish. What began as restraint became theater, the costume became a shield. Sociologist Max Weber called this transformation, the routinization of charisma. Institutions, he said, codify what once was spontaneous, passion becomes policy, innovation becomes habit. In politics, that habit is ritual, the mask that allows individuals to act without constantly questioning why. 3. A language as armor. Ritual doesn't end with costumes. It extends into language. The honorable member opposite. Order. Order. Will the minister please clarify? Each phrase sounds polite but serves a deeper purpose. It turns moral disputes into procedural ones. By replacing "you lied" with "the member is mistaken," civility is maintained, but moral clarity fades. Over time, this verbal choreography becomes self-referential. Debates revolve around process rather than substance. The system begins to speak to itself, not to the public. Citizens hear noise instead of meaning and disengage. In a sense, language is the institution's immune system. It neutralizes moral infection by translating passion into protocol. 4. The power of predictability. Ritual also offers comfort. In a world of constant flux, predictable forms create psychological safety. Soldiers march, judges wear robes, parliaments open with prayer. Predictability reduces anxiety. But when predictability becomes rigidity, adaptability dies. The procedures meant to keep chaos out start keeping change out too. Parliamentary committees sometimes spend more time debating procedure than policy. The system protects its rhythm even when the melody is wrong. Political theorist Hannah Arendt warned that bureaucracy is the rule of nobody, a structure so fixated on its own continuity that accountability vanishes inside it. Ritual is bureaucracy's spiritual cousin, comfort without conscience. 5. The aesthetic of authority. There's also the visual effect. The robes, the wood paneling, the Latin mottos, they project continuity, which can inspire respect but also intimidation. To the uninitiated, it all looks sacred, to the insiders it feels safe. Architecture itself participates. The chamber's opposing benches, barely 2 sword lengths apart, were designed to remind members that debate should stop short of violence. Today, that physical design amplifies polarization, 2 sides facing off like rival teams, no round tables, no shared center. Buildings, like rituals, teach behavior. Sit in opposition long enough, and opposition becomes identity. 6. Corporate and judicial parallels. Parliament is not unique. Courtrooms and corporate boardrooms share the same grammar of power, elevated chairs, controlled speech, scripted etiquette. Each environment demands a performance of authority. The purpose, again, was once noble: discipline, impartiality, professionalism. But these rituals can also depersonalize. The robe or suit becomes a moral firewall. I am not cruel, I am performing duty. This is why scandals across institutions, political, financial, religious, share the same texture, polite language wrapped around ethical failure. The uniform says, "Trust me." The behavior says, "Don't look too closely." 7. Ritual as distraction. When tradition becomes performance, it distracts from accountability. Ceremonies consume attention that could be spent on substance. Legislatures stage pageantry while budgets vanish into audit reports few read. Citizens see ritual precision and mistake it for moral precision. The paradox is cruel: the more ornate the ceremony, the more fragile the credibility. Excessive symbolism often signals a deficit of trust. As public faith declines, institutions decorate themselves further, hoping grandeur will substitute for grace. 8. The modernization trap. Calls for reform often focus on optics, removing wigs, streaming debates, diversifying dress codes. These help, but they don't change incentives. The deeper modernization lies in behavior: transparent budgeting, plain language laws, participatory hearings. Some legislatures have begun experimenting. In Iceland, citizens help draft bills online. In Taiwan, the parliament uses digital platforms for public consultation. These modest innovations reduce the distance between the governed and the governing. They replace ritual with relationship. 9. Toward rituals of accountability. Ritual itself isn't the enemy, meaningless ritual is. Societies need ceremony to mark purpose. The challenge is to update the symbolism. Imagine if parliamentary sessions opened not with a mace, but with the Auditor General's most recent integrity report, if every budget reading included a citizen scorecard, if new members swore not only an oath to the crown but a vow of transparency to the people. Those, too, are rituals, but ones that serve awareness rather than amnesia. 10. Closing reflection. Tradition gives a nation its memory, reform gives it its conscience. When institutions mistake nostalgia for virtue, they drift into theater. When they reimagine ritual as service, they regain meaning. The cure for hollow ceremony isn't destruction, it's redesign. Democracy doesn't need fewer rituals, it needs rituals that remind everyone why they're there. End of Chapter 2. The Architecture of Ritual, How Tradition Becomes Distraction. That chapter unpacked the economic and psychological forces, campaign funding, media cycles, party discipline, that quietly shape ethical drift. This next chapter is balanced and fact-based. It will use research from political science, economics, and behavioral psychology to explain why institutions drift toward self-interest. Part 2. The Incentive Machine. Chapter 3. How Systems Reward the Wrong Behavior.